So we will start this now. So I want to start by doing an acknowledgement of country. So I and the National Archives of Australia acknowledge as the traditional owners and custodians of the country throughout Australia. And we acknowledge the continuing connection to land, sea, and community. We pay our respects to the people, their cultures, elders, past, present, and emerging. And I'm coming to you from the Darug and Eora land, so I say Warami, which is welcome. Let's start with some of the records from the collection. So this photo is of members of the Australian Information Service television team, and it was taken in April 1975, so 1 month after colour went live in Australia. And just as housekeeping, you can see little citations at the bottom of records and photos, and you can use those to look up the records on record search afterwards if you like. Yeah, so they'll be throughout. So as we all know, it was a huge moment that changed the way that we see ourselves. And because of this, there's been quite a bit produced and published in the last week about the anniversary. So my colleague Alex is going to post some links throughout this talk to different articles for you to have a look at as well. So the ABC did a great overview, as you can imagine. Colour was 10 years late, but it arrived with a big bang. And the NFSA has really fantastic resources as well. It's not just government sources and the ABC, but also the commercial channels. And so I really recommend that. So given that is all out there, I didn't want to just repeat what everybody else has done, and rather it's better to add to that. So when looking at this, we had to think about how to go about it. And the trouble for me especially is that there's just so many stories you can tell with colour TV as the jumping off point. I started making a list of all the ways I could go about it, but just listing the ideas alone would fill up this hour. So decided to go back to basics, and that is, who are we? So we are the National Archives. The National Archives holds the federal government's most valuable records, and it's a treasure trove of stories. And so we're going to be focusing on the federal government, its agencies and actions, and their relationship and how they with colour television. So that also means highlighting what the National Archives is all about, and we are about records. Lots of records in myriad formats, about and created by the agencies and representatives of the government in Australia. So to some, I'm assuming not the people here, that could sound dreary, but we know it's not, and that there's really amazing discoveries, which I'm going to highlight throughout, hopefully to inspire you to look further. It was really hard to try and narrow it down, so I'll only sort of highlight pieces as we go through. So, and I had to try and promise, but we'll see how well I do, to not go on too many tangents. For instance, I've allowed myself to go on this tangent. These are postmasters. So this is one of the first postmaster generals in Australia, and it will become relevant. This is the Honourable Drake, Postmaster General. He was Postmaster General from 1901 to 1903. Then we have a fantastic photo from the collection as well of Postmaster General Davidson. He was in charge from 56 to 63. And here's another more informal photograph of him. But then the postmaster that came after him was Alan Hume, and I love this photo. Slightly different style of photo, but just as dynamic. So like I said, that'll become clear, but really when we think about federal government and the people in it, we don't normally think of postmaster generals first. We tend to think of prime ministers. And so we're going to start with Gough Whitlam. So Gough Whitlam was the Prime Minister at the time of the transition to colour TV and much of the public lead up to it. So here he is in this photograph in the middle in September 1974. And he's visiting a factory in Penrith that was established to build colour TV sets. So this was an Australian, British and Japanese collaboration, and it was the company Rank NEC. So some of you might know, if you know the song that was played before as well, that Rank is known for the imagery of a man striking a gong. So that might look familiar to some of you. And here's also an image of this day, which for some reason isn't in our collection. It wasn't. It doesn't appear to have been captured by official government photographers, but it's Penrith's answer to the strongman performing in front of Whitlam. But there is footage online of this as well, which is great to watch. So while Whitlam is largely associated with colour television, as he is with Australia and the arts in general, the actual decision to finally set a date and announce when Australia was going to colour TV was actually made by the Prime Minister before that, William McMahon. So I like to imagine that McMahon made this decision at this time because he had a 4-year-old son called Julian, and he could just tell that Julian was meant for the small screen and that his beautiful baby blues needed to be seen in full colour, as they ended up being. So that's why I imagine the decision was made. And so, like I said, the announcement came in 1972. This is another photo from 1972 from a collection, and I picked this one because it's similar to the Whitlam photo in that it's the Prime Minister with representatives from Japan, this time the Japanese government on an official visit. And Japan was one of the leading manufacturers of colour TVs at the time and the technology. So we've got McMahon on the right, and on the far left, it's Yoshiro Nakasone, who is the Japanese Minister for International Trade and Industry, which makes a lot of sense, and Masayoshi Ohira, so he was the Minister for Foreign Affairs. So it's interesting, you can see those threads of planning and negotiations all the way through the different parliaments. So there was years and years of discussion about the lead times and the setting of dates right up until that date of the 1st of March was decided. And in this record that I'm showing you here, this is from the Department of the Prime Minister and Cabinet, and there's a lot of detail about what was considered before making the decisions about the different dates. And in this paper, they say that they're going to give 18 months notice before the date, the live date. The announcement was a really long time coming. Other countries had moved to colour many, many years prior. But it's also interesting to think that television had only really started 20 or 30 years prior, depending on where you were. There had been a lot of discussion in the industry about the go date, also known as C Day. And even though there was lots of discussion, when it was finally announced, it was still a shock to some. So this is a letter sent to McMahon and forwarded to the then Minister of Trade and Industry, who was also the Deputy Prime Minister and leader of the National Party and musical inspiration, Doug Anthony. And it's from Mr. Heyer of Phillips Holdings. And now I know that the way we communicate changes over time, but I do think this letter seems to have some tone in it. So it starts, I was in a meeting last Tuesday when suddenly I was called out to take an urgent telephone call. I was then asked to give immediate comments on the announcement which you had just made on the introduction of colour television. You can imagine that I was rather startled, and it took me some time to grasp the importance of this very unexpected statement of yours. I was really taken completely by surprise. The purpose of this letter is then to convey to you my gratitude for the decision you have taken, which puts an end to a long period of expensive uncertainty in the industry, and in my company in particular. And he goes on further to say, at the risk of creating the image in your mind that I am by nature a somewhat dissatisfied person, I would like to make one observation, namely that you may, with your cabinet, still consider the possibility of reducing your lead time of 3 years to 2 years. So the reason why the Philips Holdings wanted to shorten the time of 3 years to 2 years was because of the production and sales of television sets. 3 years was a really long time for people to be wondering about which technology to buy. And so they really feared that that would slow down the industry. So that's why they wanted it to be shorter. Um, the archives records show that there was a lot of discussion happening between the government and industry, and they were often actively meeting to discuss how to keep the production of TV in the country. There you go. And so a major part of this discussion was tariffs, which, as we know, is highly topical again. So we can see here that the Electronics Importers Association were very against tariffs, and they produced explainers like this on why it was such a bad idea to have tariffs. And in one of the questions they answered, does the Australian industry need protection? And they say the Australian industry is non-existent, yet the consumer has to pay 45% of import duties. But then we have the Australian Electronics Industry Council, and they counter with their own material explaining how vital tariffs were. So that's one there. I find it fascinating that they've got such similar colour choices in their materials. So as well as those published materials, there's a lot of correspondence to and from. You can see a telegram here, and they're requesting to hold off making decisions, but for the government to hold off on making decisions before they've read their feedback. And then we've got another one. This is the Federation of the Australian Commercial Television Stations, and they're saying they don't really think there needs to be tariffs, or the tariffs don't need to be so high. Because when you look at the tariffs that were being proposed, they were much higher than in other comparable countries. But ultimately, the government did decide to go with quite strong tariffs. And so I put this in. This is my favorite photo of TV manufacturing from our collection, basically because the woman in the photo looks like a marble statue. And this was made by AWA Thorn, and many of you probably have had Thorn TVs, and also Rank Arena. I can see that there's a fantastic discussion of the technicalities in the chat, which I'm really pleased about. We were going to try and have a whole talk on that as part of this, but we were unable to at this time. So it's good that it's happening there. And this particular photo, just as an aside, is taken by the Australian News and Information Bureau. So at the same time that all this discussion about television sets and the specs about those themselves was being discussed, there was other topics that were being considered by the government. And a really, really big one of those was infrastructure. And like the chat's talking about here, the choice of PAL as the way of going forward. And so this, when we start looking at how they were talking about infrastructure, is how we get back to Postmaster. So we're coming back to Alan Hume, and I have picked another much more professional shot of him for this as well. But you can see that he does have an ashtray in the front there as well. So the discussion of infrastructure for setting up colour TV was led by the ABC and the Post Office, which is what sent me down the rabbit hole earlier. And so that's why we've got Hume again. So the fact that the Post Office was involved initially had me quite confused. And it is true that the Postmaster General department hasn't been responsible for media and communication technology in Australia since 1975. But when colour television was being introduced, it was a major factor. So the PMG was established in 1901 to look after telegraph services. And so then as time progressed, that expanded out into radio and television as well. And so again, it's really interesting to see how that change of technology and those huge steps forward in technology, there wouldn't be necessarily a department to set that up that already exists. And so it gets taken on by the most natural one. And for that was the Post Office, because that covered the infrastructure of the country. I also find it really interesting when you look at how the Post Office was really important in terms of the development of the documentary genre in the UK as well. So I find that really interesting. So like we said, the infrastructure discussion was led by the ABC and the Postmaster General, and this is some of the reports that they put together. And in this one, they talk about it affect how the general feeling of those most affected by this technology, namely the Australian Broadcasting Commission and the Post Office, in relation to national television services, as well as the operators of commercial television stations. And so this is where they discussed that 18 months isn't enough, and that's when it gets pushed out to 3 years. And this is the index of the report. And it's a fascinating read for any people who love a good report and review of an industry. And I think actually a lot of you in the chat would really enjoy looking this one up. So I'll give you a second to note down the citation here at the bottom right-hand side. It's digitized and online, and it's really worth reading. It goes over the different formats and why they were chosen. It goes over the different countries and how they were set up, and when they introduced colour TV and how they did it as well. So as well as preparing the systems and technology for the switchover, the ABC was also responsible for preparing the public. And so these are some images from short ads they ran in the lead up to that changeover. There's quite a few of the ads, so I narrowed it down to 2 ads. And some people in the chat again might be aghast, but I did it deliberately. I left in some leader and countdown, just so you could all see it again, the magic of watching something on film.
Oh, Jesus, God. Jesus, I'd love a beer. Oh, God. Oh. Excuse me, sir. Do you know that ABC is going colour on March 1st? You beauty. Colour shows. Beauty.
2, 3, 4, march first into color.
So as well as setting up and preparing the public for it, another thing the ABC was doing was setting up all of their equipment. And again, there's been chats about that. So they were actually shooting in colour in many departments for a year or two before the changeover went on to television. And the National Archives was able to bring evidence of this or examples of this to light last year with the 1974 joint sitting of Parliament. So it was a historical event, so it was broadcast on live television in black and white because it was 1974. But it was actually shot in colour by the ABC and then held by the House of Representatives. And so we were able to make copies of that and digitise it in collaboration with the Whitlam Institute last year and play it in Old Parliament House 50 years ago to the day that it happened. And there's an article on our website about that that also has a link to a clip about the copying. It was actually the copies that the House of Reps had were on U-matic. So again, you might, and you can see some of the process of it being digitized, so you might find that interesting. Yes, so Catherine said Bob Catter. That's Bob Catter Senior. When you look through, so we've got a young Paul Keating there, and that's Bob Catter Senior. There's actually about 4 or 5 fathers of current politicians on all sides. So we've got Kim Beazley's father is in it, Katter's father, and I can't remember the other ones at the moment, but there's lots. It's yeah, again, very interesting historical document in that it makes you realize how much those things can stay in family lines. And I agree with Emma. I just saw there is just so much knowledge in this chat. I think we need to organize something else from this, but we'll see what happens. So as well as sort of setting up the equipment and everything like that, they also were dealing with the internal mechanisms and staff. And so one of the really interesting things I found in the documents was they performed checks on staff's sight and did undertaking colour perception testing. So they say here, we have been asked to make sure that these tests are conducted in such a way so as not to arouse any staff unhappiness or industrial activity. Obviously, the procedures could worry some people who may feel that results could jeopardize their livelihood. Yeah, so when they say things like that, of course people are going to worry. But I also can imagine people don't like change, and it would be frightening if all of a sudden you're being having your site tested. So anyone who's watching now, were you at the ABC at the time, and do you remember having your color color perception tested? I'd be really interested to know that. So, you know, they tried to make sure that they didn't make people feel frightened of the testing, and then they got their reports. And yes, so they were trying to work out how to make it, whether to make it compulsory for some programs in some areas and then voluntary in others. And then they got their results, and it was very good. There was actually the results were much better than the average. Alec got 99 out of 100, excellent. So you were one of the exceptional results that were up here. Only 5 people out of the 307 that have reported in this study showed poor color recognition, which was really good. And so those test results were discussed with the staff themselves. And so it says, then the question arises as to what to do about those staff members who did not offer themselves for testing. In most cases, it should not matter, but in key colour assessment positions, there could be isolated problems. And so they're sort of looking to test what to do with that. So it's interesting, again, you see that sort of change and the what if and things like that. And people going in to work in the film and television industry or preservation here at the archives don't have colour testing, but you can see that when it's a new industry, sort of all of those concerns for those kinds of things. When they were trying to set up the facilities to make sure they have everything, there was also a suggestion that maybe while they were making these changes, people should be able to come in and watch staff work behind glass walls, which you did sometimes see on other news broadcasts on other channels, but people were very against the zoo vibe. And so we've got a response here. I too have reservations regarding windows and galleries in operational areas. Apart from the fact that it is not industrially sound to have staff under public scrutiny whilst working, there are other factors involved, not the least being that during production there is always some passive time, and the tax-paying public are very critical of anything they construe as loafing. So again, anyone who was there at the time, did you ever loaf about? And would you have liked to have been viewed by the public? So with all of these different things happening, you can imagine all the rush, all the different things that had to be considered, counting down the days. And then, of course, there's always things that go wrong, doesn't matter how early they are signposted. So they realized that at Gore Hill, and around the country at the ABC, they didn't actually have colour viewing monitors for people to watch with the changeover. So, and again here, this was just the week before that they were sort of discussing this. They were saying, having said my thanks, may I now formally protest at the absolute and utter idiocy of a television station involved in colour production which does not have one colour television monitor operational in the entire studio complex, when we have seen fit to install colour sets for monitor purposes in Broadcast House and other selected private homes. Yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine the annoyance, and I can imagine it happening. So again, you can see that there was a lot of work happening at the ABC, and we've got so many fantastic records that go into a lot of detail about that, about all the technical stuff, the audience research, the focus on changing the sets for color, because there used to be also a lot of art put into how to film things in black and white and make sure things popped and stuff. And so how they had to bring in color and how that would change things. And again, like I said, we'll have the changeover at the end. But in this sort of last section, I actually want to go forward a few years, but also back a few topics in this talk to politicians and tariffs. So this story that I'm about to tell is told through the personal papers held for Prime Minister Malcolm Fraser, and they relate to how colour television sets brought down a minister or two. So we're dealing with these likely lots. So we've got the Minister for Health, Michael McKellar, and he was caused a huge headache for Malcolm Fraser in something that would make an excellent episode of Border Security. And it also involves the Minister for Customs, John Moore, but we don't seem to have a photo of him at the moment. So he misses out on being in this shot. The records of Fraser with this are fantastic in detail. And again, this is something of a researcher and archivist dream, because you're looking at all of these documents. They've got accounts from everyone involved, and you can sort of piece together the story. So I've done a small version of that here, just because I was enjoying myself a bit too much with it. So the basic story is that McKellar flew into the country in October 1981, and he didn't declare anything when he came in, although he was carrying a colour TV combo unit. And so when concerns were raised, there was an attempt to subdue questions around it, which created further questions about the behaviour of everyone involved, and he had to be stood down from his position, resign. And it's worth noting that Moore, who also had to stand down, he was the Minister for sort of Customs at the time, but he remained in politics after this. All right. So there he is. So this record's all about McKellar, and it's in Fraser's records. So we start with his actual a copy of his customs declaration form. So we can see here that he has ticked no to do you have a television set, which was one of the questions on the forms at the time when you were coming into the country. And he has signed it and said that he's answering for himself. Later in one of the documents, he says that somebody else filled it out for him because he was very busy with something to do with the Duke of Edinburgh, but he did sign it himself. And then we have another document. This is an account from one of the staff on the day, where they said that his form said no TV, but they noticed that Mr. McKellar was in possession of an unboxed combination unit, which included a television screen. So, I mean, he'd actually unpacked it and was just sort of carrying it under his arm, but he said that there was no TV. And so then we have a further explanation of what happened in the day. On the day they were examining, he was in the customs line, and they were looking at his baggage. And the person says, I began the baggage examination, and within a few seconds, I was approached by a supervising preventative officer, Patterson, who said, do you know who you've got there? He said, yes, McKellar. And he said, stop the search and let him go. He said, okay. And then I informed McKellar that he could leave, which he did. So he did not have the opportunity to examine the TV set of the type or make. And he says here that some comments were made by other officers about Mr. McKellar being allowed to leave without examination. So you can see that there was already grumblings as soon as he was told he could leave. So there was clearly concern, and follow up only 3 days later, when McKellar actually wrote to the Minister for Business and Consumer Affairs, Moore, telling him that he had forgotten to declare this television. So the customs officer, seeing the appliance which I had unpacked and was carrying, asked me whether it was incorporated a television receiver. I replied that it did, and it was then pointed out that my customs declaration did not cover this fact. This was an unintentional oversight, and naturally I'm anxious to fulfill my legal obligations. So in this letter, he does say, look, I did have a TV, but he doesn't mention that it was colour, which is another major part of it, because that really changed sort of what you had to pay with customs. And so then the next document we have is someone reporting again on what they did. They followed up with the Minister of Customs at the same time that McKellar was contacting him as well. And subsequently, the minister called me back, and he said that he had stressed to McKellar the seriousness of making an inaccurate passenger statement, and that Mr. McKellar had assured him that it would not occur again. And the minister then said that he wished to regard that as an end to the matter. So sort of just it's done. And one of the duty officers, it's interesting with this follow-up, had, again in one of the follow-up, said there was a TV and it was colour. But then he'd crossed out the word colour in the form. And he was asked to report on why he had written that or why he'd crossed it out. And he says, the reason that this word has been lined out is as follows, that at the time of writing the note, several people were nearby talking about colour TV sets, and this was shortly after the incident. So as far as he was aware, it was a black and white TV. He didn't know it was colour. He accidentally wrote down colour, but that's just because other people were talking about colour TVs. And so he crossed it out later because he realised that that was wrong. And so, that evidence is not there, it's all laid to rest. But some people took this law and their job very, very seriously and followed up. And that was Mr. Mayhew, who had also spoken to McKellar on the day and he'd said that he had a colour TV. So they had a meeting and they said that they'd already conducted a high-level inquiry with the minister into the matter and established that the unit imported by the minister, McKellar, was not a colour model but a black and white model, and as such was entitled to a concessional duty-free bylaw admission. So again, nothing to see here. But Mr. Mayhew objected. And it's very interesting, the use of quite emotive language here, emotive even today, but definitely for the 70s, and definitely when written about a male as well, I think. So they said Mr. Mayhew was in a highly emotional, agitated state. And would not concede the possibility of his erring. And he insisted that he had been orally advised by the passenger that the unit was coloured and he actually sought permission to attend Canberra at his own expense to interrogate the minister in an effort to confirm this allegation. And the fact is that Mr. Mayhew was right. It was a colour television, and everyone else was trying to sort of flub it so to let it rest. And the fact is that if McKellar had actually just declared it, this is one of the other reports, he would have had to pay $600 extra in today's money in the tariffs and the customs duty free. And then because he'd failed to declare it, if that got doubled at the airport, so he would have had to have paid $1,200, which is a lot of money. You can see why people try and sort of sneak these things through, but instead he ended up losing his job and causing a lot of drama for the government, and it still comes up in lists of reasons why politicians have had to resign in Australian government. So that is the story of McKellar and the Prime Minister. So that covers some of the records of the National Archives. There are so many more that we had to leave out. And I'm leaving on this picture because I love it so much. There was even a whole report on choosing what TVs and whether to rent them or purchase them to go into Kirribilli and the Lodge, and whole discussions on the finish of the television, whether it should be teak or walnut finish. And it's really interesting because there's a discussion about Mrs. Whitlam at the time wanted to continue renting a TV. They were renting one while they were making sure everything worked properly. She didn't want to buy one because there was economic hardships, and they didn't want to look like the government was spending a lot of money on these personal items. And there's a discussion, and it's on the 7th of November, 1975. So 4 days before the dismissal. And they're like, be careful of what you say around Mrs. Whitlam about this, because she doesn't want to look like they're spending too much money. So yeah, lots and lots of different things. So thank you very much, Jack. So what we'll do is we'll leave off and we'll play Auntie Jack.
Videotape ident. Auntie Jack welcomes colour. Segment 1, take 1, record 20 seconds, 275, replay March 1st, 1975, number 130191, end of ident. Run, gone, the brave.
Hello, me little lovelies. This is your Queen speaking from my secret headquarters in Wollongong. My Arthur and I would like to warn you that the whole world has been gobbled up by the terrible colour television monster. Just always remember, the proud colours of Wollongong, black and grey, will fly at full mast, and there will still be hope. Because if Wollongong breaks out in colour, it could mean the end of the world. Arthur, how goes it on the Illawarra front?
Oh, I'm looking at the Port Kembla Steelworks, Auntie Jack.
Yeah.
And nothing but pitch black.
Oh, good.
Hey, wait a minute. Wait a minute, the grass under the foundry. It's turning green.
Perky, Perky, it's here already.
Oh, Auntie Jack, I'm scared.
Yeah, so are you. Arthur, I can feel it in me bones.
Oh, look, Auntie Jack, we've picked up the colour monster on the radar.
Struth, it's at Corrimal South, postcode 2518 already.
Oh, look, it's coming up the garden path. It'll be here in 10 seconds.
9, 8, 7, 6. You're early.
I'm terribly sorry.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Arr, avast there, landlubbers. Where be the poop deck?
Under the crow's nest.
Oh, step aside, Fatso. Let the new colourful personality of Captain Kid Eager say, ahoy there, shipmates.
Oh, you poor thing. Look at the colour monster's done. It's turned you into a lady.
Auntie Jack, that's a pirate dressed as Flange Desire.
See what I mean, Arthur? Colour has an unnatural effect on pirates, turns them into ladies.
Oh, listen, Puddin'. To join this colour world, you've got to give them eyes, tits and teeth.
Hey.
Well, where are your tits? Oh, they must have dropped.
He's right.
Ah, there they be.
Ah, they be a fine pair of tits,
Look, Auntie Jack, the colour. It's leaking through the window.
Dude, a filthy thing all over my new carpet.
Look, it's filling the room. How are we going to breathe?
Quick, Arthur, the Wollongong air. I'll try and hold it down. There it is.
Hey, look at me, I'm in colour. Come on in, it's lovely.
I can't hold it on very long. Here it goes, Arthur. Oh, what a beautiful room. It's really quite nice being in colour, isn't it? I don't feel any different.
Oh, yeah, that's because you aren't any different, Tubby. You're still in black and white.
I am not.
Yes, you are, Auntie Jack.
I am. Well, I'm glad I didn't catch it.
Catch what?
That horrible disease that comes with colour, green slime polkaditis.
Green slime polkaditis. Oh, gee, I'm all right, kid. I'm still in black and white. Oh, look, Auntie Jack, I've gone pink.
Pink flesh poo, Arthur, you've caught it.
What'll I do? What'll I do?
I can save you, Arthur.
Oh.
Colour remover, right, shut your eyes. Turn round. Right, save.
Oh, yeah, well, what about me then, eh?
All right, shut your eyes. Right, say ah. No, don't work on pirates.
Oh, hey, listen, I'm not a pirate. I'm Kid Eager.
A Martian.
A Martian? How do you know he's a Martian?
Here, look, big red feet, baggy pants and a propeller.
Oh, that's me. Hey, I've always had those.
Yeah? Well, how about a spotted face?
Hey? Ah, a Martian. Honey Jack, I'm changing colour.
Naturally, sip to 1.
Oh, yuck, a green Martian. Oh, Honey Jack, I've got gangrene. Does that mean they're going to cut me off?
I hope so. You know, the last person who got Martian green slime polkaditis turned into a green jelly.
A green jelly? Oh, bull.
What flavour is he, Arthur?
Tastes like lime, Auntie Jack.
Yum, yum, a live Martian.
Hey, get your finger out of my ear, Auntie Jack. Auntie Jack, you've gone coloured.
Why not, Arthur? It was only a big joke.
A big joke? No joke being a lime-flavoured jelly.
Oh, it's all right, Kitty Pooh. You just wobble along with us. All right, hit it, Arthur. Hey, kid!
Pick on someone your own colour.
Farewell, black and white. We saw you leave tonight.
And remember, all you kiddies, don't you watch colour jokes on black and white television, because if you do, I'm going to jump through your sets and rip your bloody pink arms off. And I will too.
Pooh, Auntie Jack, what's that horrible smell?
What horrible smell? Oh, I think I stepped in some kid eager.